thing that's interesting about the school reports is this. They were quite literary, and they were full of history and other interesting information, as well as straight talking about the schools. Now, some of the reason for this was that one of the members of the school committee for almost this entire period, though not every single year, was the Reverend William A. Houghton, who was, I believe that Houghton wrote most of these, because they read like sermons. It is amazing to review the state of society in our mother country, only as far back as the time of our pilgrim fathers as we are in advance of them. The ignorance and degradation among the common people surpasses belief, not without institutions of learning. But the thought of the people being educated is a wholly modern idea. Martin Luther alone stands on record before the Puritans as the advocate of the education of the people by the state. The Church of the Middle Ages did much to promote specifically religious education, but no state government ever took the subject of proper education in hand till the nucleus of our own Commonwealth was formed. Popular education as the duty of the state and the right of the citizen, which next to Christianity itself has done more for the world in 200 years than has been done by all other educational influences within the Christian era. It is a singular fact in divine providence that the two nations which, aside from all others, have adopted the philosophy of educating the masses at public charge are the two powers in the two hemispheres which today stand first in the scale of nations, the United States in America, and Prussia, which now means United Germany, in Europe. England has withheld the lamp of education from the common people, and for 50 years her power has been waning in the balance of power in Europe. And today her common people are in terror of the throne, while Prussia, 50 years ago adopting the system which England rejected, has nurtured a people which, in 1866, in a 70 days war, placed herself as the head of Germany at the head of the European powers. Only rulers and subjects, and that in a servile sense. No nation is really a free people today, save such as have established themselves on intelligence in the masses. His thesis in all this is that free public education makes all the difference that you can imagine in terms of the power and the growth of nations. You know, Mr. Houghton, he was the minister of the Congregational Church for 25 years. He was on the school committee for years, and he also was the noted public speaker of the town. This is the old East Schoolhouse. If you go down Central Street to what's now called Berlin Farms, it was built right into the stone wall along the side of the street. And it was built in 1892. The town built 4 schoolhouses like that in 1892. This is the kind of report that they gave about each school and how they were conducted and so forth. The center school was taught both summer and winter by Miss Carolyn E. Lincoln of Northborough. The teacher early gained the affection of the pupils, the confidence of the parents, and the approbation of the committee. Order was fully sustained without severity, and very gratifying success in teaching was obvious to the committee and visitors. Credit is also due to the scholars for their general deportment and improvement in studies. One feature of public interest in the schools the past year deserves commendation. We have seen more in attendance at the examinations, and in several instances have seen scholars and parents from other districts. The example is worthy of imitation. We only wonder that parents can so generally commit their children so unreservedly to other hands and trust wholly to verbal report as to what the school is. A personal visit to the school each term by each parent would no doubt be of more practical value to the scholars than 10% added to the school money. It would have also a decidedly elevating effect on the behavior of the children. Teachers, too, would be animated and sustained by their efforts. Now, in that time, The great obstacle, now this is a comment on the condition of the schools in 1854-55. The great obstacle to this town's due advancement in common schools is the condition of our schoolhouses. We have not a schoolhouse in town that answers to the spirit of this day, or such as the interests of our children really demand. The center schoolhouse is merely passable. The west is less so. The east is in tolerable repair, but intolerable in limited space and miserable arrangement. The south and the north are both a public reproach. Your committee appreciates the qualifying fact in this matter that the question is not merely having new schoolhouses or not having them, but that it involves the question of district or town agency and building. The valuation of the town exceeds $276,000. An estate, a piece of property, of $2,500 would pay $37.50 in taxes to build the new school. Put such an estate at auction in the South or North District today, any purchaser whose citizenship would be desirable would have respect for his children and the means offered for their education. Who believes that such a purchaser would not pay $50 or $100 more for a $2,500 estate had the town or district such a schoolhouse as there might be built for $800? Some say we do not wish to sell, but are not good schoolhouses worth as much to the citizens of Berlin and their children as to others? It is the opinion of your committee that they are, judging from what we see of your children in the school. We think none more deserving. A man will do more work and do it better in a commodious shop than one the reverse of it. The best of teachers and all books at command cannot impart an impulse that will overcome the depressing influences of a miserable schoolroom. The same labor and skill in a better place for its exercise would pay 20 or 50% more profit. There is something absolutely depressing to mental power and elasticity, not alone in bad air, too hot or too cold, but in ill-contrived or dilapidated old schoolhouse. It operates against the teacher and pupils in point of actual efficiency, in the manner of value received for expense and labor. Just as well expect to make your son an accomplished farmer with a wooden plow. Just as well expect him to make a first-class mason with a shingle for a trowel. Just as well expect him to compete with the present generation of shoemakers, whittling out his shoe pegs by hand. The cases are not fully parallel, but the illustration is valid. We think the mothers' experiences on this subject confirms our argument. Some have always argued that schoolhouse would ever be abused and that nothing but unpainted boards or planks should be exposed to the rough treatment of scholars. It is a libel on scholars and on human nature too. Better houses have been erected and finished comfortably and tastefully, and where old schoolhouses had suffered all manner of abuse, the new houses occupied by the same pupils have been kept as free from abuse as the family abode. Experience, moreover, has proved the inefficiency of the district system compared with the town system. There is but one sentiment on this subject among all the officers of the Massachusetts Board of Education, and it is not at all improbable that the legislature will abolish the whole service system without reserve before we should have time to build anew, as we need to, by districts. Goes on, we had these schools, and we had 5 of them. As originally built, they were virtually identical, and here's where they react to getting the new schools after all that complaining. In 1785, the vote was first put whether the district will build a schoolhouse near the meeting house, and it passed in the negative. That meant no center school. Then voted the district be divided into 4 squadrons for the benefit of schooling. And that was, these are reports in after the new schools are built. Every single year they had all the schools and who were all the teachers and how well it did and so forth, but I thought these were kind of interesting. The South School in its summer term was under the instruction of Miss Lucy A. Wheeler of this town. After preparation at the normal school, she assumed this as her first charge. School was prospering under her diligent and successful labors till it was deemed advisable to suspend it for a short vacation. After this, the school could not again be gathered, save in a little more than half of its former number. The occasion of this failure did not fully appear. Sure, at least no fault was charged upon the teacher. All spoke kindly and favorably of her efforts. The school would doubtless have come to a satisfactory issue but for the suspension. The committee could not but feel that it was unjust to the teacher and unjust to the public interest for parents to decline to send their children again, unless some other reason could be assigned. William Bassett, Esquire. Now, Mr. Bassett lived in South Berlin in those days. He was a member of the school committee. He resumed his charge of the school for the winter. The other members of the board take it upon themselves to say that the same energy and efficiency which characterized the school last winter were continued with increased success of the term just closed. Much credit is due also to the pupils, who have very generally responded to the zeal and fidelity of their teacher. Many assurances of affection and goodwill were expressed on their part in several very praiseworthy compositions which were read at the examination of the school. We have commended the public interest in the South District. The same exists in a commendable degree. Of the East School, under the charge of Miss Mary H. Holder for another year, we hardly have need to speak for any information. Her entire success in all that constitutes a good school is a public fact. It's only just, however, both to Miss Holder and her pupils, and also to the parents, to say that the committee regard the school of our East District as a model for the town. No teacher can accomplish what has been accomplished there in the last 2 years without confiding and diligent pupils. We commend their example to the pupils of the town. Nor are the parents to be omitted in our commendation. The school register is almost free of every bad mark. Only 5 or 6 tardinesses in the whole term in a school of 30 or 40 scholars, many of them living quite distant. In some families, no blameworthy mark of any kind is to be found in the register for successive terms. Go, parents, and do likewise. Amid the general excellencies of this school, in variety of subjects and interest of manner in their exhibition, we cannot but refer to the rare skill and art, that we may say, which have been developed in penmanship and map drawing. Mrs. Sawyer has fitted herself by effort in normal school advantages for her work. Her winter term is in progress at the date of this report, but in all indications the school has advanced even upon its progress of the last year. The loss is felt of some scholars who have passed out of the school, but the same pleasant and happy aspect which for years have characterized the North School still pervades it. Some comments about the nature of teaching and education. Your committee have had gratifying evidence in the year of thoroughness of mental drill in the several branches taught. We have some youthful mathematicians, far advanced considering their opportunities. Grammar is reviving. Geography, we think, is better comprehended. Writing has been successfully taught. Very neat books and accomplished penmanship may be seen in all our schools. In some of them, well-executed maps and various drawings. We do not wish to see professional writing masters keeping evening schools among us. Better subscribe $1 to lengthen your school. Speaking of parental age in education, we are confident there are many parents among us and grandparents who could awaken a new interest in grammar. We may be in error, but our opinion is that the grammarians have analyzed the subject matter of grammar to the very depth. So at least for youthful minds, such excessive analysis is as far from the general outlines of grammar as the chemical analysis of minerals is from the general principles of geology. It is our conviction that interest in grammar has been less as this excessive analysis has prevailed. The time is within memory of some of us when grammatical structure of particular sentences as to parsing were discussed throughout the districts. Another word to parents, you will find by our tables a great difference in the districts on the matter of tardiness. Much we know depends on teachers. In the same district, for instance, in summer there were only 30 tardinesses, but in winter 190. In the East and Center districts, under the same teachers both terms, there are about 8 tardy marks to each school for the year. The North District has 105. The West, 145. The South, 220. You will see by the tables that in some cases a large percentage belongs to particular families. No doubt parents could make all our records like East and Center. But we have this to say, that the districts most negligent in this respect have been the most exemplary in school visitation. This is in 1877-78. The center school, through the entire year, was in charge of Miss O.E.H. Elliott of Boston, a young lady of great energy and rare executive ability. The school was the largest and most difficult in town, and this was her first effort at teaching. But what she lacked in experience was fully made up in natural gifts and industry. The school in the winter term was transferred to the old townhouse, which had been fitted up for the purpose and made a very comfortable schoolroom. In the year 1875-76 and for a couple of years, or perhaps 3, they ran a high school. In that time, initially they sort of tried to do it all at the center school. They brought the older students from all the districts together and had a separate teacher for the older kids. And that was a great idea. The high school in Center District, Miss Mary A. Bassett, resuming her charge at our autumn high school, made it another success, so gratifying that hardly a voice has been heard against an experiment which so many had thought to be of doubtful utility. Miss Bassett's attainments, her thoroughness, aptness in teaching, and her energy and perseverance are all known to parents and pupils. The winter term of the Center District has been made under her tuition to rank with the high school in character. This, of course, could not have been effected but for the division of the school by removing between 30 and 40 small scholars to Barnes Hall. Still, there were left 40 to form the center school. It is with great satisfaction that we can again report the center school in a condition worthy of its ability and position. The Barnes Hall School is a new development. Our high school teacher being engaged for the winter term of the center school, the house overflowed at the opening. With the concurrence of the selectmen, seats and desks were obtained for Barnes Hall. Miss Cora Bell Holbrook from our own high school was engaged as teacher. With a few small scholars from Carterville, belonging to the North District, the school has numbered nearly 40 pupils. Miss Holbrook has developed aptness in teaching and authority united with gentleness. With advantages in prospect, we anticipate for her eminent success. In the Houghton history, it says that the high school was conducted in Barnes Hall. My grandmother wrote in the margin, no. The high school was conducted at the center school, and the younger children from the center district went to Barnes Hall. And she should have known, because she was about 10 at the time. The town hall, the first town hall, behind the meeting house on the common, right over against the Carter Street side. In 1870, when we built the new town hall, the one that we still have up there, they closed that one. They moved that one to the place next to the burying ground, this side of the burying ground. And the little house that's there today at number 8 Linden Street is our first townhouse. A visit to this school was like a visit to a conservatory of flowers. There was such an air of freshness, brightness, and beauty. Under such auspices, how could such a school be otherwise than prosperous? The exercises and examination were exceedingly interesting, the whole being marked by perfect order and thorough mastery of the branches taught. The school was a complete success. The management of the high school at the old center schoolhouse was resumed by Miss Sarah E. Fisk, the popular and very successful principal of the previous year. The excellent reputation which the school achieved last year was fully maintained, and even more. Your committee feel proud of the school and consider it an honor of the town. We wish that more of our young men and women had availed themselves of the advantages it has afforded. All of the teachers for the year just closed are, with one exception, graduates of Framingham Normal School. Others things being equal, we prefer normal graduates for teachers, especially when they come backed by the unqualified recommendation of Miss Hyde, the popular and efficient principal of the Framingham Normal School. Not that normal instruction can create a teacher out of nothing, but that it is better calculated to draw out and develop those faculties so essential in the teacher when they exist in the individual by nature than any other system with which we are acquainted. They have this note: since writing this report, the town has voted on the suggestion in regard to an extension of the high school, and also on the question of sustaining the school the ensuing year, and has decided adversely on both, much to the disappointment of the friends of the high school. The East School, like this, was built in 1857, like all the others. And then but they had a problem. There was an issue with Hudson. It's a very long way from there up to Berlin Farms. Go out to Hudson. And they actually paid Hudson $100 or something, and they took those kids and they went to the Hudson School. It was very close to the town line. The question of schooling in the east part of the town assumes an aggravated form at this time, which we think demands your immediate attention. This is the Gordian knot which has baffled the skill of our wise men for a series of years. Citizens have viewed it from afar as if it were some dangerous thing, hardly daring to approach it, much less lay hands on it. Shall the tactics of Alexander be adopted and this vexed question forever put at rest? Heretofore, $100 a year has satisfied the Hudson Committee for educating our children. Now they say if Berlin will bear its proportionate share of the expense of running the school, it will be continued. Otherwise, it will be closed. By their statement, the annual expense of the school is $350. Berlin finished 17 of the 26 scholars attending. So Berlin had 17 and Hudson had only 9. And they're paying $350 and getting $100 from us. In view of the situation now existing, we recommend that the town, as soon as may be, provide suitable facilities for schooling to the families living in that portion of our territory. The case involves a change in the location of the East School, and consequently a transfer of a small portion of the scholars who now attend there to the center and perhaps the North Schools. We are confident the changes can be made, bringing all of our scholars into our own schools without increasing the number of schools. Note, since the above was submitted to the town, it is voted to move the East Schoolhouse or build a new one on the quote-unquote the King place, and instructed the selectmen to carry the vote into effect. And the following year's report relates to that. During the year, an important change has been made in the East District, so-called, by which those children who had for a term of years attended school in the town of Hudson have all been brought into our own school. Several town meetings were held on the subject, and it was finally determined that the schoolhouse, which for 20 years had been an ornament to Mr. J.W. Crossman's neighborhood and a delight for him, should either be removed to a point near Mr. Holder's residence or sold where it stood and a new one erected at said point. Previous to this, a committee had been chosen to look the ground over and select a location which would be best to accommodate all who attend. Much time was consumed in fixing a spot. Conflicting interests were at work. Some thought it should go no farther than Stone's Corner, which was the corner of Gates Pond Road and Old Central Street. Some wanted it carried east of George H. Maynard, so that's east of 136. It would be roughly to what used to be the Murphy's Chicken Farm. Yeah, Murphy. So Murphy's Corner roughly is where they would fix it. The committee on location endeavored to perform their duty without personal bias, but with an eye single to the public interest. Deeming the plan to move the old house as the best plan, they acted upon it after some parley, secured a deed of the site selected. They caused the house to be moved and set upon it. As the road was too narrow to admit of its passage whole, it was moved in halves, which, having reached their destination, were reunited and the roof was reshingled. The house is apparently as good as before its removal. The house was apparently as good as before its removal. The yard is enclosed as are the other school grounds with a fence on 3 sides, and with this difference, that in the rear there is a stone wall instead of a picket fence, an improvement decidedly. The location is elevated, airy, sunny, and inviting, second to none of the schoolhouse locations in town. Some 25 children attend, all living within the radius of about a mile. The removal of the east schoolhouse necessitated some changes in the westerly part of the district, and those families living on the county road between John Crossman's and the center, what's now the mobile station near 495, everybody toward the center was moved toward the center. And also those on Sawyer Hill. The subject of ventilation in the public buildings, especially in our schoolrooms, is one that demands serious consideration. Mr. Beecher once said, in a crowded hall, "There is no subject about which so much is said and so little known as the subject of ventilation." And the air of this hall justifies the assertion. If we were asked to take into the mouth what we had once ejected from it, we should think it a very filthy thing. But we do a much more filthy thing when we take into our lungs not only the breath we ourselves have ejected, but that which our neighbors have too. The above remarks would be applicable on many occasions in our own town hall or in our crowded schoolrooms. These rooms have practically no means of ventilation except through open doors or windows, which let the cold air in directly on the heated children, imperiling health, if not life. That a change of air is necessary in our schoolrooms, where from 30 to 50 or more children are congregated, needs no argument to prove. Any person who will visit one of them when school is in session will be abundantly convinced of the evidence of his own senses. It is important to provide for the proper physical development of children as for their mental culture. Health is the greatest of earthly blessings, and to neglect the laws which govern it when they are known is, to say the least, a grave mistake. The discarded schoolhouses in which our fathers were educated were better than our own in respect to ventilation, for the air had free ingress and egress through the open cracks of the doors, windows, and floors. And this great chimney flue, which led from an open fireplace up into the pure air without. Some of these schoolhouses, if not well ventilated, were much ventilated, and the air was rarely oppressive for want of oxygen. The importance of subject as bearing upon the well-being of the rising generation can hardly be overestimated. One of the other ideas that was submitted for the business of the high school was to remodel one of these schools and make it so they'd get another schoolroom. That was an idea that was expressed in the 1870s, and it was finally done in 1911. Note the difference, the disparity of date. And that's when we got the center school as a 2-story building. That same school, the same kind of school that was shown in the last picture, was the center school, and they added the 2nd story, raised the roof and added the 2nd story in 1911. And thereafter, the 7th and 8th grades were up there. At any rate, thank you for your attention, and I hope you find it enjoyed a little bit about schools from 1855 to 1887.